What's up everyone, Bradley Jack Design with another design breakdown. This time we're going to take a look at this Kevin Durant graphic for my highest paid athletes of 2019 series. Kevin Durant was number 10 on that list, so here's the last graphic for it. So here's the finished graphic here, and then below that I've got all of the layers of everything it took to create this graphic. So I'm going to dive right in and show you what it took. So when I made this, there were a couple challenges because there aren't really that many photos of Kevin Durant in a Nets jersey since he plays for the Nets now. So I found this photo of him in a Golden State Warriors jersey, just sort of a studio headshot, and then I used a different photo from the Nets media day that actually has him in a jersey. So found this really nice unedited photo, raw image of Kevin Durant, and then I made some tweaks to it, got rid of some of the blues, pulled out some of the details in his face, used generic, one of my actions that I use, BJD2 I think, tweaked the hue and saturation here to get rid of the cyan, and then a couple curves adjustments. This one's tweaking the eyes to brighten them up a bit. This one is as well, and then I'm brightening up the right side of his face, or from what we see, the right side of his face. So that gives us this image here. Now I masked out part of it because just further down the line when I was developing this graphic, that's what I did. So I masked out some here so we can see the text better, and then I masked out the bottom here because of where his jersey was. So on top of the initial photo of Kevin Durant, I've got a couple curves layers. This curves layer gets rid of the gray down here, so you can see it's kind of a light gray, not fully black, so this makes it fully black. Gets rid of some of the fringe around his hair. Got another curves layer to just brighten up the highlights a bit on Kevin's face, and then I have one to darken this side and to brighten this side, so it's just adding a little more contrast as if the light is shining from the right side. So I've got Kevin Durant here, then I've got another photo of Kevin. So this is the unedited version, and this is the edited version, similar to what I did on the other Kevin Durant graphic. Clipped it out. I've used my standard action BJD2. Then I have a curves layer to brighten up the whole image, except I have the blend if layer style selected, which is blending all the way from the right to left on the highlights. I've playing around to see what that would do. And then I tweaked the blues a bit, just like in the other one. I took away all the cyan. So if I go to cyan, saturation's down to 0. Maybe blues too, not the blues, just cyan. So that's got this image here. I have a selective color on top of that, which you can see if we zoom in here. It just changes the color of his skin tone faintly. I wanted it to match this other image of Kevin Durant, so I have that on there. So we've got, oops, hit print on accident. Look, everything's back, cool. All right, so we got small Kevin. Let's see, what do we want to hop into next? So next thing I did was I tried to figure out how to add this text. So I knew going into this graphic, I wanted to have some text, and I wanted to make sure I had 3 to 4 different types of contrast with the text. So I found a quote that he has. So it's, I know that hard work got me here, and the day I stop working hard, this can all, and I've got in here, go away. So this text is pretty simple. Typed out this text. I made hard work and stop working hard a little bit bigger. I gave them a little bit of a gradient overlay to give it a little bit of depth. I've got some of the quotation marks on here. I have those set to a fill of 0, and then I just have a small stroke on them. So if you want to make a stroke around text, you can do it that way. It works well for small things like quotation marks. So I've got contrast with the size between hard work and the rest of the quote along with this. There's also added contrast from the gradient map on top of it. And then I have even more contrast, a third or fourth version of contrast with having go away be negated in this white box. So I wanted to have this text all line up, and I wanted to make sure that I had 1, 2, 3, 4 if you count the gradient variations of contrast, 5 if you include the quotation marks. So that was a goal I had going into this graphic. That's what I wanted to do, so I had to make sure I included it. Then I've got sort of this line to solidify this all together, guide the eye to go down over here to where it says go away. So that is the text. The font I used, if you guys are curious, is Presio, number 21 light, extra compressed. Then this one up here is black extra compressed, and this is probably black extra compressed as well. So if you wanted to know what font I was using, that is the font. So I wanted to add some more stuff to this. So I knew I either wanted to make this very black and white, or have black and white contrast with their city jerseys, their city edition jerseys. So this folder here does that. So I found this image, and I don't think is the actual pattern the Nets use, but I think it's made by the same artist. When I was looking up the patterns, this popped up. So I found this nice pattern that looks like what they use. And what I did was I used the free transform tool and made it so it was at a bit of a perspective, so it would be sort of parallel to Kevin's face instead of just having it be flat. I wanted to have it some sort of dimension, so it's going back in space. So I took that and set a Gaussian blur to it, and I think these are all the same. So I've got 3 different versions of that layer, which you can see make up this. So the first one's Gaussian blurred at 10, 10, and 10. So they're all the exact same layer. They just all have slightly different adjustments for each of them. So let me look on here. So it looks like some of these, underline layer, I thought it looks like these have blend if modes on them, but nothing is popping up. Oh well. Is it here? Okay. So in the group of them all, I have it so it's blending in anything that's darker than 137. So basically it's not going to hit any of these dark areas. It's only going to hit the highlights. That's why it looks sort of like this already. If I were to move this back down, you can see it would look like this. So that's not what I want. So I drag it over. It, 1, makes it so you don't see it on the background. Then 2, it also doesn't show up on parts of his face. So I have these on there. I've got the bottom one set to color at 75%. Then I've got overlay at 75%. And then another overlaid layer at 75%. And this is just from playing around with overlay, soft light, screen, just to see what would give me the color I want, but still make it look like it's light shining on his face. I have a vibrance layer on top of this as well, as you can see, where I boosted the vibrant and the saturation to even more accentuate the color coming from that photo I found. This is all in one group, and I actually went in and masked out the group completely and then painted back in specific areas of his face. So I painted in only on the side of his face that would be immediately hit by that light. So it's a lot of the white spots. So that's why I used the blend if, is because I wanted to make sure it hit all of these white spots, but avoided all of the dark black spots. So if I turn it on, you can still see the black details coming through, and if we highlight this, you can see where I painted. So I painted mainly here on the right side of his face. I avoided his eye. I wanted to make sure that was still white. I did have some color on there, but it looked a little weird, so I took it out. So we've got on here his face painted back on. So it was really just experimenting with what I thought would look realistic. I'm still playing around with trying to figure out how to do, lighting like that to make it the most realistic instead of just having, a blanket of color over here, having some actual depth between it. So if there's light on that side, we're going to need actual light. So I took that same image, this one here. Oh no, I took a different image. All right, so I found this photo. This photo from Unsplash of some light streaks, some blur. Looks like it could have been like a sunset or something. So I went ahead and, don't save that. I went ahead and put that on here. I've got 2 of these layers. So I lined it up here so all the light streaks were shining on here. So if I turn off the Gaussian blur, you can see it a little bit better. And actually, if I save this, you can see it a little bit better. So this is what it looks like here. So I got just like these little bits of light streaks coming in from the side, but I wanted them to match this. So in the original photo here, I added that image that I showed you before, set to overlay in color, and then I have a curves layer to really brighten up this middle spot. So I added that on there, and since I set it to overlay in color, it's changing the color of everything in here to somewhat match the light that I have on his face already. So if we go back, it changes from this to this. Then I have some Gaussian blurs on top of these, just so I can make it so it's not so harsh of lines. So I've got 2 Gaussian blurs, so it's just sort of a little bit of a light leak on the side. Then I have a levels layer on top of that to add a little bit more contrast to it. Just played around, tweaking it a tiny bit. So I've got the light there. Some other things in here that are a little more minor. So I've got KD's signature next to him to go along with the composition. Just sort of over here tucked in, not interfering here. Somewhat just well balanced in the composition. I got a couple patches I found of the New York Nets logo that I put on the side to fill up a little bit of the white space. And these are just a photo of a patch that I masked out, put a hue and saturation layer on it because there was a little bit of blue from where it was cut out. Actually, I didn't mask it out. It was already a ping file, I believe. No, I masked it out, but someone added it, whatever. I got a little bit of camera raw on it to darken it up and pull out some of the highlights in there. So I've got 2 of those patches, nothing too complicated there. In the bottom left-hand corner, I've got this bridge. So this is a photo of the Brooklyn Bridge that I took when I was in New York. Went ahead and inverted it because it was a day shot, so I wanted it to be black. So I've got it inverted with a gradient map on top of that. Adds just a little bit of texture down here in the corner, which I thought was nice to have in the composition. Then I found this awesome photo of this snake on Unsplash again. So if I open that up, just this cool, highlight of just this snake looking upwards that I thought fit very well compositionally right here in the corner. So I've got it set to screen. And I have one set to normal because at one point in time this overlapped a little bit, and you can see once you overlap, since it's set to screen, anything that's black you're going to be able to see through. So I have got 2 layers there to make sure we saw the head, but I don't really need it in this one. So this is just a photo of a snake set to screen down here to fill in this bottom right corner. So that's most of what we've got going on. I added a couple little things of dust to add some more contrast. Without this, I thought it was needing a little bit something more. So I've got just 2 little stock images of some dust flying around that I have set to screen. Then I've got some chain link, which is where a lot of depth is added to this piece. So I have this chain link file that I've been using. It's basically just a chain link fence I found that I masked out. Let me leave that. So it's just chain link. Then I took that same image we used from before with all the colors on it. First I set a gradient map on top of it to turn it black and white. Then I have the colorful layer on top of it set to color to add some color back into the chain link. So we've got some chain link around the edges, and then I have it set to a Gaussian blur of 10 just to give it a little bit of depth. I mean, it would probably look fine like this, but if you blur it, it definitely adds a lot more dimension to what you're working with. So I got the chain link on there. So I've got some cool colors on the chain link, some colors from the side here, colors on his face, and then a lot of black from the Nets jersey and the background. Then I've got some overlays, so we will turn these on. So I've got a selective color overlay that tweaks a little bit of the reds. I think it might tweak a little bit of the blacks, just a tiny bit. If I just cycle through here, tweaks the whites. The selective color is fun if you go in and play around with it. So you can see this really doesn't have much on it. I'm tweaking the reds a little bit and tweaking the blacks slightly as well. But you can see here, It adds a lot more contrast to the image itself. Then I have a color lookup on top of this, which is the 2395, and that's set to 50%, which I do quite often. Then I've got a vibrance layer on top of that to add more vibrance on it. You can see it adds a ton of saturation on his skin, and it adds a little bit more of saturation, especially since I added more saturation to the color as well. Then I have one final curves layer you can see here to drop down the blacks and darken everything up just a little bit. Then I just added my logo and his logo in the bottom right hand corner, and that's it. So for this piece, I used it was fun to figure out how to do this on his face. That's something I'm trying to figure out a little bit more for my personal work. And then I wanted to play around with the composition, have things at a slight angle, which adds a little bit of more dynamic attitude, I guess, to the design. So I hope you guys pick something up from this. If you want to drop me suggestions below on tutorials you guys might want to see, or if you want to comment and let me know what you pulled from this most, I'd really appreciate it. I love hearing how people are going to use stuff like this in their own work. And if you're not already, just make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks.